Hey guys, tonight we travel deep beneath a medieval fortress where the air is damp, the stones sweat in silence, and something small is watching you from the shadows. Imagine the earthy smell of grain stacked high, a chill on your skin as you brush past a cobweb that definitely was not there a moment ago, and that strange noise just on the edge of hearing that makes your breath catch in your throat. A scratch, a shuffle, a tiny, wet squeak. You are not alone down here. This is not just a pantry. It is the heart of a castle's survival. And something's wrong. Crumbs lead in a trail across the flagstones. One sack has been clawed open, and something in your gut tightens when you spot it. The unmistakable droppings that say it plainly. Rats have come. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's listening and when. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach for your lantern. The flame sputters slightly. There are eyes on you, tiny, twitching, glinting like wet marbles, just out of reach of the light. You are standing in one of the castle's cellars, and you are already in over your head. There is a reason that every functioning medieval stronghold employed a man, or occasionally a woman, whose job title never quite made it into the noble chronicles. The rat overseer. Not a knight, not a steward, not even a cook. But this person knew the rhythms of the castle better than almost anyone. And tonight, you are beginning to understand why. You trudge deeper, boots soft on straw-strewn stones. There is a sudden sharp smell, sour grain, maybe spoiled wine. The rats do not just nibble, they urinate. Their waste spoils more food than their teeth ever could. In a time before refrigeration, a single tainted barrel might wipe out a whole season's rationing. You do the math. 20 sacks of barley, 3 already breached, a winter siege looming. You start to panic a little. But hold on. You are not the first to feel this way. This scene has played out in thousands of castles across centuries. And almost always, someone had been watching long before the crisis hit. A man with a notebook. No, really, a leather-bound ledger with lines drawn in ink and strange little check marks beside cryptic symbols, even tiny rat-like doodles that, depending on the overseer, ranged from comical to disturbingly lifelike. He was the quiet one in the great hall, the one who never raised his voice, but always sat near the kitchens, scribbling. You step over a broken jug. The candle sputters again. You imagine him standing here 2 nights ago. Did he know already? Was this breach in the wall one he had warned about? Or, more unsettling, had he stopped warning people? Historians still argue whether every castle truly had an official rat overseer as a titled role, or if it was a function absorbed by other jobs, like cellar master, cook, or even a minor steward. But written records survive that make one thing clear. Someone was documenting rodent activity meticulously. The title may not have existed in stone, but the task did, and it was deadly serious. Here's your first strange detail for the night. Rat droppings were sometimes weighed. You heard that right. In some regions, especially during times of siege or food shortage, The overseer would collect evidence of rodent damage and literally measure it in weight. A single ounce might trigger panic, and if that ounce included bits of wool or fabric, that meant the rats had reached the sleeping quarters. Above your head, faint creaks echo. Maybe it is just the floorboards shifting. Maybe not. You tighten your grip on the lantern. You notice a faded chalk mark near the floor. 3 in a triangle. It might be a mason's mark, or it might be the overseer's symbol for nest found. Every cellar was its own language, and these marks were grammar, urgent whispers between workers who could not afford to shout. A rat's nest could be anything: a heap of straw, a gap in the mortar, even the inside of an old boot left unattended. The overseer had to find them, had to document them, and sometimes had to torch them. Here is a little known tidbit. Some overseers carried herbs like rue and tansy, not for spells, but because rats supposedly hated the smell. Whether it worked or not, no one's quite sure. But hey, if carrying a pouch of stinky leaves gave you courage, who's to argue? You pause by a sack of apples. One is half chewed, brownish juice staining the cloth beneath it. You imagine the overseer noticing this days ago, quietly writing "fruit compromised" in that odd, looping script, not calling attention to it yet, just noting, always noting, because if the infestation spread, that note might be the first clue. A breadcrumb trail back to Patient Zero, Rat Edition. There is no magic here, just vigilance. A kind of low-level paranoia blessed with good handwriting. Over time, some overseers developed obsessions. They named individual rats. They mapped sightings like generals plotting enemy movement. One even claimed to have trained a weasel as a co-investigator. Historians think he may have also drunk heavily. You take a step back. Your foot brushes something. You freeze, then glance down. It is a notebook, abandoned, damp, but still legible. The ink is smudged, but the date is clear. 3 days ago. Last entry reads, "Sound in West Tunnel. Multiple. May need bait." The final line is darker, as if the pen was pressed hard in urgency. Tell Martin. He will not like it. And now, neither do you. The chill is settling in deeper now. Stone walls seem to drink the warmth straight from your fingertips. Your lantern's glow dances across shelves lined with preserves, jars of honey, pickled onions, and a few suspiciously puffed lids. The cellar should feel like a treasure trove, but right now, it feels like a war zone waiting to happen. You hear the faintest rustle, something tiny skittering, just out of reach. You lift the lantern, half expecting to catch a glimpse of something with whiskers and beady eyes. But there's nothing. Just shadows, stacked grain sacks, and the vague stink of damp flour and rat urine. This place, the pantry, the granary, the storeroom, is the castle's softest underbelly, not because it is weak, but because it is vital. You damage a knight's armor, he gets it repaired. You spoil his food supply, he dies in 3 weeks. You walk slowly now, running your hand across a barrel stamped with the year. The wax seal is chipped. There's something weirdly intimate about that, like someone has already poked it open for a secret taste, or something smaller has gnawed its way in. Both are bad. Tassels, For all their stone bulk and pointed towers were not invincible. In fact, they were painfully vulnerable in exactly this way. Storage. All that stone kept people in and wind out, but it also trapped air, moisture, and warmth, just enough to make it a rodent paradise, especially in winter. There is a strong argument, made by several scholars, that medieval castles were not just defensive fortresses, they were oversized pantries with attached apartments. Sure, they had moats, drawbridges, and arrow slits, but at their heart was a stockpile. Because what was the point of all that protection if your bread rotted, your ale soured, or your grain got nibbled to dust? Now imagine the daily balancing act. Bakers demanded flour. Brewers needed barley. The cook shouted about spoiled meat, and the steward demanded inventory tallies. Into this chaos walked the person no one invited to dinner, the one who came to count droppings. Historians still debate how this role began. Was it born out of necessity? Did the steward delegate it to an unlucky apprentice? Or did someone, one cold winter night, just decide to start writing down how bad things were getting? Whatever the origin, it was clear someone needed to track the damage, and the damage was staggering. One adult rat can consume up to a third of its body weight in food each day. That is not a number you want to scale when you realize that a typical castle cellar could shelter hundreds of the furry little freeloaders. Multiply that over months, and you are losing not just calories, but coin. Food was currency, stored value, bargaining power. Losing food meant losing leverage. You stop beside a grain bin and lift the lid carefully. Inside, a handful of dark pellets nestled among the kernels. A rat has been here, probably several. Maybe still is. And this is where it gets worse. They do not just eat, they ruin. A rat gnawing a sack does not just consume a handful of barley, it invites moisture in. Spoiled grains ferment, sprout, or mold. Molded grain can cause hallucinations, illness, even death. There are reports, some dubious, some more credible, of entire castle wings falling ill after consuming contaminated flour. Were rats to blame? No one can say for sure, but it is a pattern worth noting. Here is tonight's quirky tidbit. Some medieval cookbooks include advice on how to spot rat-damaged ingredients, with instructions like sniff the flour for a sour wind, or press the cheese for hidden crumbles. Not exactly scientific, but honestly, not bad advice. And then there's the problem of the rats, extended family. Mice, weasels, sometimes even snakes, drawn in by the same warmth and food supply. The overseer might log all of these, creating what one modern historian half-jokingly called the medieval pest census. You walk the narrow corridor now, between rows of hanging meats, dried sausages, smoked fish, and something you cannot identify that smells like disappointment and vinegar. These were high-value targets. Rats could leap, climb, and chew their way up to even the best hung ham. There is one dangling above you now, the bottom nibbled to a crescent. You wince. You picture the overseer here again, muttering as he jots a short line. Third sausage compromised. Set traps by beam. Dry language, but every word a scream in disguise. because he knows what you are just beginning to grasp. One meal lost is nothing. A season's worth is everything. And this soft underbelly extends beyond food. Bedding was vulnerable too. Straw mattresses, furs, linens, all irresistible to nesting rodents. That meant disease, lice, and the one thing that terrified everyone more than a sword: plague. Not the plague, just plague. It was a whisper, not a scream, a shadow of dread. You could die with no wound at all, and many did. The rats knew none of this, of course. They lived joyfully. They found holes in walls, slunk through drains, and bred in the dark corners of forgotten storage. They did not plan a siege. They just thrived in one. And you? You are walking the same path their overseer once did, maybe in the same boots. The torchlight flickers again, and you imagine him not as a hero, but as a tired man with ink-stained fingers and a deep, creeping fear, not of rats, of what rats meant. You stop at a pile of firewood. There, tucked between the logs, is a tiny nest made of shredded cloth. It smells like old sweat and mushrooms. You back away slowly. That is not just a nest. That is a base, a sign, a declaration. We are here. The castle's belly is soft, but it has eyes, and a notebook, and maybe, if you are very lucky, enough time. You are not quite sure when it started to feel personal. Maybe it was the half-eaten sausage. Maybe it was the notebook. But now, as you slowly make your way up the winding stone steps out of the cellar, lantern held low, you begin to understand that this was not just about food. This was about control. Rats were not just vermin. They were chaos incarnate. Tiny, twitchy, fur-covered insurgents who could make a mockery of your entire fortress with nothing more than their teeth and a few litters of wriggling pink offspring. And the rat overseer? He was your lone line of defense, a quiet sentry with a quill instead of a sword. You reach the landing. The kitchen opens before you. A burst of heat and the rich aroma of stewed lentils and garlic. Pots bubble over the hearth. A pig turns slowly on a spit. A scullery maid hums to herself, completely unaware of the war being waged just 2 floors below. You almost want to shout at her. Do you know what's crawling beneath your feet? But you do not, because no one ever shouted for the rat overseer. That was the curse of the job. If you did it well, no one noticed. If you failed, everyone starved. He kept a low profile, this shadowy figure in the castle's social fabric. Not quite staff, not quite official, but his presence lingered in the margins of the kitchen logs, the supply rosters, the urgent repairs. Some castles had him report directly to the steward. Others gave him private keys to storage rooms. And a rare few, usually the ones under constant siege, granted him access to the armory. Because rat control, it turns out, sometimes required fire. Not metaphorically, literally. Some overseers used smoke, embers, or burning straw to flush out nests. Dangerous? Absolutely. But in the calculus of medieval survival, a few charred floorboards were worth saving a year's grain. And here's a weird bit of trivia for your dreams tonight. In a few regions of medieval France, rat catchers were allowed to bill the Lord for damages caused during extermination. That included broken barrels, ruined walls, and once, the partial collapse of a wine rack. Apparently, rats had nested behind it, and the overseer was very thorough. You weave through the kitchen now. No one notices you. A boy slices onions with watery eyes. An older woman lifts the lid of a pot and tuts. And then you see it, the small blackboard tucked in the corner by the larder door. It is scrawled with strange chalk markings, abbreviated symbols, dates, initials. Some are circled, some crossed out. One line reads, "Cheese moved 14 scraps, found a BB." You grin. BB must be the overseer. You are standing in his realm now. Historians still argue whether these overseers were trusted or merely tolerated. Some accounts suggest they were respected professionals, even feared for their detailed knowledge of the castle's weaknesses. Others paint them more as eccentric loners, prone to paranoia and odd superstitions, wearing talismans, refusing to eat certain foods, or whispering warnings to themselves. But one thing is consistent. Their notes mattered. These small records, often scribbled in chalk, ink, or even carved into wooden beams, offered a kind of map of infestation, where the rats had been, where they were going, where they might strike next. You peek through the open pantry door. A mouse trap sits in the corner. It has been triggered, but whatever it caught has already been taken. The bait long gone. The war continues. Let us talk tools for a moment. The overseer's toolkit was a weird mix. Traps ranged from simple snap devices to clever box contraptions baited with salted meat. Some preferred glue mixtures, horrifyingly sticky stuff made from tree resin and honey. And if you are wondering who had to clean those up, yes, him. Then there was bait, an art unto itself. Cheese is mostly a myth, by the way. Rats prefer high-carb options like grain, bread, or even soap. Yes, soap. In fact, one record from a castle in Saxony suggests a rat trapper once used a chunk of rendered lye soap to lure an entire nest out of hiding. Gross? Obviously. Effective? Uncomfortably so. You hear footsteps and step back into the shadows. A steward passes, nodding to a servant, carrying a scroll. You wonder, has he read the overseer's latest report? Or has he ignored it, like so many others do? Because that was the real tragedy. The overseer did not just battle rats. He battled indifference, warnings unheeded, advice dismissed. They are just mice. Someone would scoff until they were not, until they were disease and famine and dead children. You lean against the wall near the fireplace. The heat feels good. The tension starts to melt from your shoulders. And then, something catches your eye. Above the hearth, etched faintly into the stone, are initials, BB, the same as on the chalkboard. Beside them, a small mark, an abstract rat, just 3 flicks of a knife. It is his signature. He was here. Suddenly, it is not just about the rats. It is about the man behind the notebook, this silent sentinel with soot under his nails and the weight of a whole fortress's well-being on his back. His job was not glamorous, but it was essential. And here is your scholarly debate for the section. Did overseers actually reduce rat populations, or just delay the inevitable? Some argue they were fighting a losing battle, chasing shadows in a world without true pest control. Others claim their records and diligence saved countless lives and made the difference between survival and starvation during long winters and sieges. You step back into the hallway. The kitchen noise fades behind you. There is a new chill in the air, but it is not from the cold. It is the sense that, somewhere nearby, something is watching. There is a silence you do not notice until it ends. It slips in like mist, right before something moves. Something small, something soft, something alive. You pause at the threshold of the great hall, a long corridor of flickering torches and faded banners. The stone floor echoes underfoot at the far end. An old table stands half cleared after a late meal, crumbs scattered like an open invitation. And that is the thing. In a castle, everything speaks. Crumbs are signals. Droplets are maps. A cracked floorboard is a welcome mat. To you, that table is just messy. But to a rat, it is a feast, a scent trail, and a scouting mission. That is what the overseer learned to read, not just droppings or claw marks, but signs, patterns, repeats, a flick of black fur where it should not be, a dish left out one night too many. All of it part of an invisible web that wrapped the castle in a constant low-level crisis. You kneel by the edge of the table, run a finger through the crumbs, and wonder how many eyes saw them before you did. Rodent eyes, overseer eyes, both scanning for different things, both far hungrier than they looked. What did the overseer carry besides the notebook? Most likely a blade, a set of keys, and a sack of powder, herbs, and dried urine from ferrets or weasels. Yes, really. People used predator scents to mark storage zones. Was it effective? Historians still argue whether that particular trick was superstition, savvy science, or just wishful thinking from someone desperate for fewer teeth marks in their barley. But what is not in dispute is this. The notebook mattered. It might have been bound in leather or stitched together with twine and grit, its pages rough and full of smudges. Inside, it was a chronicle, not of kings or battles, but of holes in walls, missing crumbs, and suspicious chew marks. Dates, locations, estimates of colony size. Some overseers even drew crude rat maps, little X's marking the spots of most activity. Quirky fact time. In the mid-1300s, a castle in what is now Belgium issued a formal rat journal where the rodent overseer had to log each sighting, along with weather conditions and moon phase. Apparently, someone believed rat behavior was tied to the lunar cycle. It is either proto-ethology or peak medieval overthinking, your pick. You walk beneath the high banners of the great hall. One flutters gently, disturbed by your passing or something else's. The hall feels too big now, too open, like it is daring you to keep walking. You half expect something to scurry across the floor, dragging a crust of bread twice its size. But nothing comes. Instead, you notice a small door near the tapestries. Not a grand entryway, but a servant's crawl space, half hidden in shadow. This is where the overseer went, where the real trails wound. You open it, squeeze through. The air is different here, dustier, closer. And in this narrow passage, you begin to understand how much of the castle you never see. Tunnels that connect kitchen to pantry, armory to well, dormitory to cellar. This was his world. Forgotten hallways and dark places. A few rats were inevitable, but infestation? That meant someone had failed. And failure was not just messy, it was mortal. Because castles, for all their defenses, lived and died by logistics. A well-fed guard fights harder. A warm servant works longer. And when the plague comes creeping, the ones with full bellies and clean beds are the ones who survive just long enough to bolt the gates. There's another side to this job no one liked to talk about. The psychological toll. Imagine waking up every day knowing your entire purpose was to find filth, chase shadows, and count things no one else wanted to admit were real. The overseer lived a double life, ignored by nobles, resented by cooks, and feared by superstitious maids who whispered that touching rat blood summoned curses. One chronicle even refers to the rat overseer as a bearer of quiet doom, which, honestly, sounds cooler than it probably felt. And still, they worked, because if they did not, everything else fell apart. The illusion of cleanliness, the image of control, and in a medieval castle, illusion was half the battle. You come to a wooden hatch in the floor. It creaks as you open it. Beneath lies another storage space, colder, less used. You descend the ladder and land on stone. The silence down here is total. You move your lantern in slow arcs, revealing sacks of dried peas and jugs of oil. You spot a broken trap in the corner, snapped long ago and left to rust. Beside it, a smear of red, so faded it is almost gone. And there, at the edge of the shelf, is a page, just one, torn, but legible. It reads, "Movement near the west casks. Signs of nesting. Recommend sealing vent with stone. If not, they will be back. No signature, but you know who wrote it." You hold the page, its corners curled, its ink nearly vanished. You are reading a ghost, not of a person, but of a duty, of vigilance, of sleeplessness. You wonder if anyone ever followed the advice, or if it was ignored, like so many quiet warnings, until it was too late. Outside, you hear a bell chime the hour. The castle shifts, sighs, settles. Somewhere, a rat scampers behind a beam. It has lived here longer than most of the guards. It will outlast them too, but maybe not tonight. Maybe tonight. You follow the signs, because now you understand what the overseer knew. Control is an illusion, yes, but vigilance? Vigilance is real, and it might just be enough. The vent is exactly where the note said it would be. Low, almost flush with the floor, just wide enough for a rat, maybe even a small weasel, to wriggle through. Cold air seeps out of it in shallow breaths. You kneel beside it, holding your lantern close. The flame dances against the iron grill, casting twitching shadows across the wall. There are scratches on the stone around it, claw marks, fresh. And now you're back in the overseer's shoes, piecing together a story from fragments. A dark smudge, a tail hair caught in the mesh, a tiny turd curled like punctuation. Rats had passed through here. You would not be the first to find them here, either. Medieval castles, for all their brute grandeur, were riddled with weaknesses, vents, drains, flues, tunnels, and shafts. Builders planned for defense against siege towers and arrows, not tiny, determined creatures with flexible bones and a taste for grain. It was the rat overseer's burden to patch the oversights of stonecutters and masons. And, unfortunately for him, rats could squeeze through an opening the width of your thumb. In wealthier castles, overseers were occasionally given a crew, usually boys too small or poor to say no. Their job? Crawl through tight spaces with torches, poke at nests, and scream if they saw movement. Not exactly the dream apprenticeship, but the vent is sealed now, sort of. Someone jammed it with old cloth and clay. Not ideal, but it worked for a while. Probably the overseer again, improvising between scheduled repairs that never came. You stand and take in the room. There is a rhythm here. Find, observe, report, and always record. That notebook was more than a log. It was a battle plan. Some even doubled as personal journals, with the overseer scribbling in the margins. You imagine it now. Ink fading. 8 caught in cellar. 6 more spotted. Cook still denies infestation. Must bait smarter. In one known case from a Danish fortress, the overseer's notebook survived long after the castle fell into ruin. It detailed an 18-week siege, chronicling not just troop movements or food stores, but the rat situation. The writer noted, "Cheese has gone, bread stores dwindling, rats braver. One bit a guard in his sleep." It ends with a single word, fire. Nobody is quite sure what that meant. Historians still argue whether it was a failed attempt to burn the nests, or the food, or perhaps even the castle itself in desperation. But the handwriting stops there, mid-page. You step around the shelves, and into the next chamber, where the air thickens with age and the scent of dry wood. This was once a granary, long sealed, now forgotten, except not by the rats. You spot droppings immediately, the classic dark grains of bad news. You count, because of course you count. 16. That is not random. That is a family. And nearby, a hole chewed clean through the bottom of a grain sack. You touch the edge. It crumbles under your fingers. This was recent. A shadow flickers. You freeze. But it is gone. Just your imagination, or maybe not. This is how the overseer lived. In doubt. In partial sightings. One eye always on the corner of the room, waiting for that faint twitch of movement. The trick was to be part hunter, part analyst, part philosopher, because while everyone else obsessed over what should be, the overseer focused on what was. Rat in the barley? That means food's been left too long. Nest behind the oven? Check the warmth flow. Increased sightings during rainfall? That means they are being flushed from their tunnels and are looking for dry ground. Every infestation told a story, if you were willing to listen. Now for the oddity of the day. In a remote castle in Wales, An overseer once documented ritual scratching sounds occurring only at dusk, accompanied by what he believed were rat songs. His notes describe rhythm and tempo, and while it sounds ridiculous now, some folklorists argue he may have been hearing rodent mating calls, though it is equally likely he was just losing it after too many sleepless nights and moldy rations. You peer deeper into the dark, your lantern light barely reaching the far corners. It is quiet, but you know that quiet is not peace. It is plotting. You bend down to the chewed sack and spot something underneath. A twist of twine, and stuck in the knot, a tuft of dark hair, not mouse fine, but thicker, oily. You hold it up to the light. Rat, bigger than average, possibly black rat, the worst kind. Agile climbers, fearless scavengers, carriers of plague in later centuries. Though your time here is pre-pandemic, the threat still looms. Disease, starvation, despair. One rat brings all three, but a colony? That is disaster with claws. You pocket the hair. Maybe the steward will care. Maybe not. Because here is the harsh truth of castle life. Politics trumped pestilence. If a noble was entertaining guests, no one wanted to hear about rats. If the lords were planning a hunt, the last thing they wanted was an overseer interrupting with talk of tooth marks and droppings. So the overseer learned to work in silence, to anticipate instead of ask, to seal instead of wait for orders. There are records of overseers using their own coin to buy bait, their own hands to fix cracks in the wall. No thanks, no titles, just more work. And yet, it mattered. Every patch, every trap, every scribbled line in the notebook was a step toward survival. Not just his, but the whole fortress. You linger in the chamber for a moment longer, listening, and then, faintly, you hear it. Scritch, 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 near the base of the wall. It stops when you move, but it was real. You are not alone down here. You are in their world now, and like the overseer before you, you flip open the notebook and start to write. You write slowly, the sound of your pencil or quill, if you are keeping to the roll, barely audible over the hum of stillness. Scratching, south granary wall, droppings, fresh, sack breached, black rat hair found, possible nest site. You stop, then add, suspect return route, the event. Blocked, but not sealed. And just like that, you begin to understand the rhythm of a rat overseer's day. Wake, inspect, listen, record, repeat. Not in glory, not with recognition, but with persistence. You rise and dust off your knees. The grain room behind you smells like old bread and cold fear. Ahead is the stairwell, stone steps winding upward in uneven spirals, polished in the center from centuries of use. You ascend into thinner air, closer to the kitchens, where the smells grow warmer, but the risks greater. Because food, for rats, is not just sustenance. It is a signal, an invitation. You reach the upper level. The kitchen spread out before you, cavernous and noisy. Smoke clings to the beams. Fire crackles in the hearths. The servants move in a careful ballet, chopping, stirring, tasting. And above it all, the smell of meat, bread, cheese. It hits you like a feast, and it hits the rats the same way. The overseer would have watched this room carefully, not just for rats, but for people, because a lazy cook was a rat's best friend and the overseer's worst enemy. You notice the first sign immediately: a half loaf left under the prep table, torn open, not sliced, with tooth marks, not large, but there. The cook would blame a dog or a scullion, but you know better. You lift the bread, exposing a trail of pellets behind it, neat, spaced like Morse code across the floor. You follow, and here's where it gets tricky, because kitchens were never silent. There was always movement, always fire, always people pretending not to notice things. For many, rats were a nuisance. For the overseer, they were the job, the whole job. The trail leads to a corner, a small crack near the baseboard, too narrow for your hand, but not for a rat. You kneel and bring the lantern close. The heat singes your knuckles, but the light reveals what you feared: a tunnel, dug, scraped by tiny claws. It curves away under the wall like a miniature highway. You note it. This was the overseer's trick. The notebook was not passive, it was active. You did not just log infestations. You created a map, a pattern, like a battlefield general, except your enemies had whiskers and multiplied at alarming speed. And in time, you started to predict them. There is one documented case from a castle near Toulouse where an overseer correctly guessed the next 3 infestation zones based on weather, season, and the location of the previous nests. The margin notes include, "If I am right again, I expect wine." She was. She did not get the wine. Still, the calculation amazed the stewards. It is one of the few examples where a rat overseer was praised formally. She was given a second assistant, a silver clasp for her notebook, and this is real, a room with a window, a huge promotion. And that brings us to the fringe fact of this section. Some overseers believed rats could smell lies. Yes, really. One 15th century account claims a nobleman who kept lying to his steward about grain storage was constantly plagued by rats until he confessed to hoarding extra sacks in the East Tower. The overseer's notes read, "The rats knew before we did. They went where the guilt was." Historians still argue whether this story is allegory, exaggeration, or just the desperate poetry of a man who spent too many nights surrounded by chewing sounds. But you can see how such myths start, because rats have a way of appearing just when secrets are ripest. Back in the kitchen, the cook glares at you from the doorway. He knows what you are doing, and he does not like it. "Again?" he mutters. "Thought you cleared them last week." You do not reply. You do not need to. The notebook is your answer. And perhaps that is the hardest part of being the overseer. Nobody thanks you when you are right, and everyone blames you when you are not. Because rats do not appear when it is convenient. They appear when the cheese is softest, when the fire is low, when no one is watching. And by the time the Lord smells them, it is already too late. You pass back through the pantry. The air here is thick with spice, pepper, salt, dried rosemary. Powerful smells, but not deterrents. Rats are not picky. The tiniest drop of grease on a beam is enough to attract an entire scout party. You climb again, up narrow stairs to the steward's quarters. You knock once. No reply. So you do what the overseer would have done. You enter anyway. The room is tidy, well lit, but near the hearth you spot the plate. Half-eaten meat pie. Still warm. You walk over. Look closely. A smear of something near the crust. Not sauce. Not gravy. Blood. And there, on the edge of the wooden plate, is a print. Tiny. Damp. Four-toed. You do not need a scholar to tell you what that means. Even the steward's quarters are breached. You make a note, and just before you leave, you glance at the chair. There, slung over the back, is a satchel. The steward's, yes, but not just his. You recognize the wear, the shape, the faint ink stain on the flap. This was once the overseer's bag. Reused, repurposed, a little insult, a little memory. You walk out slowly, down the steps again, past the cook, past the stain, past the scurrying sounds no one else hears. And you write one last thing in your notebook for the night. They're everywhere. Again, you close the notebook softly, as if sound itself might attract them, and tuck it under your arm and keep walking out of the kitchen wing and down the hallway that leads toward the old chapel. This is the part of the castle where people rarely tread after dark. Cold, echoing stone, high ceilings that seem to breathe. Even the torches struggle to stay lit here. Your footsteps sound louder, more intrusive, but you are not alone. No, you are never alone. Because while most people feared ghosts and castles, the overseer feared something far more tangible. Living, chewing, nesting proof that even the holiest corners of a fortress were never safe. You step into the chapel. It is beautiful in a crumbling sort of way. Arched windows, half covered in dust. Stained glass saints gazing down in colors muted by grime. But the pews tell another story, one odd corner at a time. Smooth wood, splintered at the edges, a single claw marked down the side of the altar. You already know what this means. The rats have made it here too. And this is more than a nuisance, because the chapel stored more than prayers. Often, this sacred space doubled as a treasury for relics, or even a hiding place for emergency grain. It was warm in winter, dry during storms, ideal for rats, especially mothers. You kneel behind the altar and shine your lantern into the corner. Nest, twisted rags, shredded parchment, tiny bones, bird, maybe. A flash of pink tail vanishes as the light hits. This is not just an infestation. It is a breeding ground. You scribble quickly, then pause, because nestled into the far end of the nest is something that does not belong. A piece of vellum, folded, preserved better than it should be. You reach in carefully and unfold it. A note, written in a familiar hand. Chapel nest still active. Third attempt failed. Removing it tomorrow if I wake. No name. No date. Just the kind of weary honesty only the notebook knew. And you remember, the rat overseer did not always survive his job. There were illnesses, scratches that turned septic, bites that festered, and sometimes just exhaustion. One collapsed in a crypt, Another drowned in a cistern while trying to block a water tunnel the rats were using to get in. Their logs end mid-sentence, and no one ever put up plaques in their honor. You rise and wipe the dust from your hands, because now you understand something deeper. This was never about just the rats. This was about the idea of control. In a world full of uncertainty, plague, war, betrayal, the rat overseer was one of the few people who noticed things, who acted early, who thought in patterns. And because of that, they saw what others missed. Sometimes that included more than rats. There is a recorded case, Bavaria, late 1300s, of an overseer whose nightly routes uncovered a hidden passage beneath the castle wine cellar. Not a rat tunnel, but a full stone corridor led to a cave. Within it, documents, letters, maps, suggesting a secret deal between the lord and foreign mercenaries. It nearly caused a civil revolt. His name was erased from the final record, but not before one steward copied a line from his log. If you track the rats long enough, you find what they're hiding from. Historians still argue whether the letters were planted or genuine. Some claim the overseer was killed to prevent their spread. Others say he vanished on purpose. But the idea lingers that watching rats too closely might lead you to truths nobody wants found. You leave the chapel slowly, footsteps muffled by the dust of secrets, out into the corridor again, down another set of stairs. You are heading now for the water system, the heart of the castle's sanitation, and, unsurprisingly, one of the rats' favorite playgrounds. You reach the pump room. It smells like rust and algae. The wheel mechanisms still sit in place, though silent now, but you can hear it, the faint sound of water trickling through the pipes. And beneath it, a different sound, the occasional plip, like something dropping into standing water. Again and again, you lower your lantern and spot the tunnel, drain-sized, just big enough. You crawl halfway in, boots scuffing the slime, slick floor. And there, on the wall, scratched faintly into the moss-covered stone, are tally marks, hundreds of them, each pair spaced evenly, some in red, others smudged with what looks like soot. Someone tracked every rat caught in this corridor, marked it like a prison wall. Maybe it was the same overseer who left the note in the chapel. Maybe not. But this was more than record keeping. This was obsession. It makes sense, you think. You do a job like this long enough, you start to talk to the walls, see meaning in shadows, live your entire life a few feet ahead of vermin. At some point, the rats stop being them and start being it a force, a pressure, always pushing back. You back out of the drain and breathe deep. There is a joke recorded in a French ledger, one of the only jokes about rat overseers anyone bothered to write down. What's the difference between a rat and the man who hunts it? Only one of them hides from the light. But the truth? The overseer never hid. He stayed in the dark on purpose, because that is where the problem was. And now that legacy is yours. You light another candle, scratch another note, and take one last look back toward the chapel. That nest is still there, but not for long. You do not return to the chapel just yet. No, first, you need to understand where the rats go once they leave a nest like that. Because rats are not creatures of chaos. Not really. They are creatures of habit, routes, patterns, favorite paths. You head toward the castle walls, where the stone meets the outer ground and the shadows run longest. This is where the rats often try to sneak in or out, and you're not the first one to track them here. There are little nicks on the stone, symbols. At first they look like nothing, just idle scratches. But when you tilt your lantern just so, you see it. A series of repeating signs, triangles, arrows, with 2 lines beneath it. They are codes, a secret system passed between overseers, not for the lords or scribes, just for the watchers. Messages left in stone for the next poor soul with a notebook and a headache. One symbol, a downward chevron, means dead end. Another, a looped line, means they always return here. You follow the signs, running your fingers along them until you reach a crumbled archway, half covered by ivy, a forgotten back stair descending into the outer foundations. The air here is different, not stale like the chapel, not wet like the cisterns. This is rat air, warm, foul, twitching with invisible life. You descend, and here, in the belly of the stone, is where you find them. Not rats, not yet, but the evidence. Gnawed bones, dozens, maybe more. A ring of them, carefully arranged around a hollowed-out nest, like some macabre trophy circle. And in the center, something worse. A necklace. Simple, silver, dented. Someone once wore that. You kneel, breath catching slightly. This is no ordinary infestation. This is territory, claimed and defended. And you remember the strange, fringe tales told in passing of rats that organized, that learned, that punished. There is an old record, rarely cited, of a monastery in Saxony where rats seemingly exiled a dominant male by driving him into a flooded wine cellar. The monks watched in silence, convinced it was judgment. The entry reads, "The lesser creatures turned on their king. Perhaps they know justice better than we." Historians still argue whether that was a parable or a real observation. Some claim the monks were drunk on the very wine the rats drowned in. Others suggest a primitive form of rodent social hierarchy. Either way, it was remembered. You make a note in your book. Outer nest chamber. Bones suggest mass kill. Necklace likely human origin. Investigate. Then, before you rise, you trace one of the bones with your fingertip. A rib, probably. Scratched, not cleanly broken. You wonder, for a second, what this person knew, or failed to know. Maybe they wandered too close to a brood. Maybe they got in the way. Or maybe they were trying to study them too closely. It is easy to joke about rats, to reduce them to tail and teeth. But down here, in the forgotten parts of the castle, you realize something darker. They are listening. You rise and leave the chamber, back up the winding steps, past the coated scratches. You run your thumb along the looped line again. They always return here. That includes you. You step out into open air and let the cold night wind slap you gently across the face. Just for a second, you are out of their world, and that is when you hear it. A scream, distant, short, not repeated. You freeze, not because of the sound, but because of the silence afterward. Even the wind seems to pause. You run across the courtyard, past the kitchens, through the servants' walk. You know where it came from. You know, the chapel. You burst in, lanterns swinging wildly. And there, where the nest once was, is nothing. Gone. Scraps blown into the corners. No bones. No parchment. Not even a single tail. But there is something new. A shoe. Small. Soft-soled. Stained at the heel. And one step away from it, a single rat pellet, still warm. You breathe slowly, in through your nose, out through your mouth, trying to stay calm, trying to stay methodical. You open the notebook and write, chapel nest removed, unknown method, screamed heard 312, one shoe found, human, left foot, no body. You pause. Then, almost without meaning to, you add, they are cleaning up. You close the notebook. No overseer ever had the full story. They worked in fragments, whispers, clues, half-seen movements in the dark. Their legacy is one of guessing, of hoping you were wrong, but preparing as if you were right. You walk the chapel perimeter one more time, looking for drag marks, for blood, for a sign that it was all just a mistake. But the floor is clean, too clean, as if someone or something did not want a trail. And that is when you start to understand. The rats were never just pests. They were part of the architecture, a moving, breathing layer beneath the stone and wood. You manage them, you log them, but you do not control them. Not really. Control is an illusion. You head back to your chamber and sit at the desk, candle flickering. Outside the window, the stars look indifferent. You write one last line for the night. The chapel is empty, but the castle is full, and you blow out the candle. The next morning, if you can call it that, since the sun barely makes it past the narrow windows, you wake with the uneasy clarity of someone who dreamed nothing at all, just blankness, a soft void, which is worse in a way. It leaves more room for the facts. The chapel nest is gone. The shoe is real. The scream still echoes faintly in your memory, like a bad taste you cannot rinse away. You sit up slowly and reach for the notebook before you do anything else. You flip to the newest page and scan the lines you wrote in the dark, checking your own handwriting like it belongs to someone else. It does not help. Nothing changed in the daylight. You dress in silence and head toward the outer wall, hoping to walk the perimeter and clear your head. But even the air feels different today, charged, as if the castle itself knows something has shifted. Along the battlements, the guards do not meet your eye, not in defiance, but in that strange, wordless courtesy reserved for those who handle things others pretend do not exist. You are the rat overseer. Your world is below theirs, but your truth runs deeper. At the western turret, you find something strange. A sand bucket, used for dousing arrows or putting out torch fires, has been tipped over. Its contents are missing. Not spilled, just gone. You crouch and examine the floor. A small trail of disturbed grit leads to a crack between the stones at the turret's base. A tight gap, but not too tight. Rats again. They had no business up here. Nothing to eat, nothing to nest in. And yet here they are, stealing fire safety supplies like mischievous little arsonists. You make a note of it. Scribble a simple line. Turret, bucket contents stolen, possible upward expansion. And that phrase, upward expansion, hits you harder than expected. Because it is easy to think of rats as coming in through the cellars, the drains, the trash piles. But what if they are going up toward the heart of the castle? That is the kind of theory that gets an overseer labeled eccentric, or worse. You head back to the central tower, where the Lord's quarters begin. You are not supposed to go there, not without invitation, but you are not going in, just around. The corridor here is polished. Tapestries hang proudly from the walls. The floors are swept. Even the candle holders shine. But just beneath the veneer, you notice something. The faintest line of debris beneath the edge of the carpet, hardly visible. You lift the corner. Beneath it, tiny chew marks on the wooden floorboards. Barely there, but unmistakable. They are here, already inside. You lower the carpet slowly and turn to leave. And there, standing in the hallway, is the steward, thin, hawk-eyed, wearing the same faintly stained tunic every steward seems issued from birth. "You should not be here," he says quietly. "I was following a lead," you reply, not defensively, just truthfully. He steps closer. "The rats?" You nod. He looks past you toward the corner you had just examined. His expression is unreadable. "They are not just a problem," he says at last. "They are a mirror." And he turns away without another word. You stand there a moment longer, notebook still open, unsure whether to write that down. But you do, because it is the kind of line that lingers, the kind that turns over in your brain while you sharpen traps or check bait. A mirror. What do rats reflect? Decay? Neglect? Or worse, truth? There is a passage in an obscure Venetian scroll from the 1400s that describes rats as the honest witness of man's failures. Not elegant, not flattering, but very, very real. And it makes you wonder, what else are they showing you? You return to your chamber for supplies, a coil of twine, a piece of chalk, and your oldest candle stub. Then you head back to the turret where the sand went missing. You lower the candle into the crack using the twine, just enough to light the edges. Then you wait. At first, nothing. Then, a flicker, movement, not the rats, at least, not directly, but the flame begins to shift, sway, as if something down there is breathing, or moving, or waiting. You raise the candle slowly and stare into the empty crack. You are not alone in the castle, not in the way you thought. There are stories, of course. Fringe accounts whispered in taverns or scrawled in the margins of crumbling ledgers. Stories of rat kings, not the twisted, tail-knotted corpses you occasionally find in the dark, but the real ones, the organizing minds, the calculating hearts of the infestation. Historians still argue whether such stories are allegory or evidence. Some believe they were metaphors for political rot, corruption beneath the throne. Others claim early biologists used the term for aggressive dominant rats and artificial colonies. But a few, a very few, believed something more literal. You sit back against the turret wall, the candle dancing in your hand. There is no glory in this job, no songs, no sigils, but the deeper you go, the clearer the truth becomes. You are not just fighting rats. You are navigating a secret history, a forgotten map of the castle that no architect ever drew. And every scratch in the wood, every chewed edge of fabric is a message. You just have to learn how to read it. And right now, the message is very clear. They are getting bolder. That night, you decide to change tactics. You cannot simply chase rats from one corner to the next anymore. The game has shifted. They are no longer just pests, but strategic players in a shadow war beneath your feet. You prepare your traps carefully, not the heavy iron cages or cruel snap traps you used in the beginning, but small, clever contraptions designed to monitor, slow, and observe. You line corridors with breadcrumbs dusted in chalk to track footprints, and use your notebook to map the routes. In the cool darkness of the servants' tunnel, you sit cross-legged on the floor, whispering to yourself as you place each trap with painstaking care. The castle feels like a living thing, its breath a faint draft, its pulse the drip of water far below. Suddenly, a scurrying noise echoes near the wall. You hold your breath, heart picking up a gentle thump against your ribs. A rat emerges, brown, twitchy whiskers, eyes glinting in the candlelight. It pauses, sniffs the air, then steps cautiously toward the crumbs. You watch, silent and still. It touches a crumb, and your chalk dust captures its paw prints perfectly, leaving a delicate map on the flagstone. You smile softly, remembering an old joke an overseer once wrote in his log. Why do rats never get lost? Because their GPS is in their tails. It is silly, but there is truth in it. These creatures know every inch of the castle better than you ever will. You follow the trail to a narrow passage. It ends abruptly at a small wooden door, too low for most humans to fit without crouching. You push it open gently and find yourself in a cramped room, filled with broken pottery, scraps of cloth, and, curiously, an old, faded tapestry. It depicts a rat wearing a crown. You laugh softly, but it is a bitter sound. This is not just myth, it is a warning. The Rat Kings, whether literal or symbolic, represent control over chaos, domination over the unseen. Your job has never been to destroy, but to understand, to keep balance. Historians still argue whether these Rat Kings ever existed, or if the term was a metaphor for deep social or political rot within medieval castles. Some say the Rat King was a superstition born from a few rare, horrific rat corpses tangled by their tails. Others believe the legends hint at a deeper truth about power structures, both rodent and human. You close the door carefully and make a note. Discovered tapestry, image of crowned rat. Symbolism unknown. Possible cultural significance or psychological warning. You lean back against the wall and exhale. This job requires more than vigilance. It demands patience and a willingness to see the castle's heartbeat where others only see walls. Outside, the night grows colder. and the castle settles into a quiet lull, broken only by distant sounds, a drip, a scratch, a faint scuttle. You realize the rats are always watching, always moving, and so must you. Tomorrow, the hunt continues. Morning arrives with a heavy gray fog rolling over the castle grounds, muting sounds and blurring edges. The world feels hushed, as if holding its breath. Perfect conditions for rat business. You think with a tired grin. They prefer the quiet too, moving under the radar when no one is looking. You grab your notebook and step outside, deciding to check the kitchens. Food stores are the heart of any castle's rat population. Control the food, and you control the rats. Or so the saying goes. The kitchen smells of yesterday's stew and a faint hint of sour bread. You move carefully, eyes scanning for the familiar signs, gnawed sacks, shredded cloth bags, tiny footprints in spilled flour. Your gaze settles on the big wooden pantry door. You run a finger along the baseboard and find fresh scratch marks. Someone, or something, has been here recently. You open the door and immediately spot the problem. Several sacks have been slashed open, their contents missing. The thieves have excellent taste, only the best grain, no wasted crumbs. You count the holes and estimate the damage. Your mind calculates the number of rats that would be required to cause this mess overnight. More than usual. You scribble. Increased activity in food stores. Coordinated feeding evident. And then you notice something else. A thin thread tied to the handle of one sack, leading out beneath the door. You pull it gently and find a tiny note attached. The handwriting is messy, in charcoal. Watch the steward. Your heart skips a beat. Is this a prank? A warning? Or something else? You glance around the kitchen, half expecting to see the steward lurking in a shadow, but no one is there. You recall a fringe theory you read once about medieval rat overseers, that some overseers secretly allied with rats, trading knowledge for protection. Could the steward be involved? Historians still argue whether such alliances ever existed, or if these were mere rumors used to explain unexplained disappearances or sabotage. You pocket the note and decide you need to speak with the steward again. Later, you find him in the Great Hall, overseeing deliveries. He looks up when you approach. Expression unreadable. I found this, you say, holding out the note. He takes it, studies it for a long moment, then smiles thinly. You have entered a deeper game, he says softly. The rats are not merely creatures of habit. They are players in the court. You nod slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle over you like the evening chill. He leans closer, voice dropping to a whisper. In this castle, everyone has a role, even the rats. You walk away with more questions than answers. But one thing is clear. Your job is no longer about pest control. It is about survival and secrets. That evening, as twilight drapes the castle in deep purples and blues, you return to your chamber with a simmering mixture of curiosity and unease. The steward's words echo in your mind like an unsettling lullaby. Everyone has a role, even the rats. You pull out your notebook and start reviewing your notes from the last days, searching for patterns or clues you may have missed. The chapel nest, the missing bones, the shoe, the sand stolen from the turret, the tapestry of the crowned rat, and now this cryptic note warning to watch the steward. You wonder if the steward is part of the puzzle, or the only person who understands it. You light your candle, and the soft glow casts dancing shadows on the stone walls. Your fingers hover over the notebook, poised to write, but hesitate. Sometimes you think the silence between the words holds more meaning than the words themselves. You recall a peculiar tale from the archives you stumbled across years ago about a rat overseer in a French chateau who kept a rat diary that described unusual behaviors. Rats bringing small gifts, guarding certain areas, even dragging away threatening objects. Most dismissed it as folklore, but you can see the possibility now. The rats might be sending messages, or at least trying to influence the environment around them. The boundary between pest and participant blurs. Historians still argue whether these behaviors are signs of simple animal intelligence or evidence of a more complex, quasi-social organization among rats in medieval strongholds. You decide it is time to test a theory. You set out a small wooden box, leaving it open in the hallway near the steward's quarters. Inside, you place a few shiny objects: an old button, a bent coin, a rusted key fragment. You want to see if the rats respond. If they are truly organized, they might collect these tokens, maybe even use them. As you finish arranging the box, you hear a faint scratching outside your door. Your heart quickens, but you hold your breath. After a long moment, the scratching fades. You blow out the candle, slip under the blankets, and wait for sleep. Before you drift off, one last thought tickles your mind. What if the rats are watching you just as closely as you watch them? You wake before dawn. The cold stone floor. Beneath your feet, a harsh reminder that comfort is a luxury you cannot afford. The box with your shiny token still waits in the hallway, like a tiny altar to curiosity and desperation. When you check it, the button is gone. So is the coin. Only the rusted key fragment remains, dull and unmoved. You smile wryly. The rats appreciate a bit of treasure, it seems. Or maybe they are playing their own version of finders keepers. Whatever the case, it confirms one thing. These creatures are far from mindless vermin. Later that day, you decide to investigate the steward further. You catch him near the kitchens and strike up a conversation, careful not to seem suspicious. He is a man of few words, but his eyes gleam with a sharp intelligence that makes you uneasy. When you mention the rats, he nods slowly. They are the castle's secret council, he says quietly, as if revealing a profound truth. In every shadow, there is a whisper of power. You raise an eyebrow. A council? You mean they work together? He shrugs. They do what they must, and sometimes they learn from us as much as we learn from them. You ponder this as you walk away, the steward's words lingering like the faint scent of burning wood. It is strange to think of rats as political players, but in a castle filled with intrigue and hidden agendas, why not? Historians still argue whether medieval rat lore was simply superstition or reflected actual observations of rat behavior linked to human social structures. Some believe it was a way to cope with the unseen forces shaping castle life. That evening, you find a new scratch mark on the pantry door, this one forming a strange symbol. It looks like a rough letter or rune. You trace it with your finger and add it to your notes. New symbol on pantry door, possible rat sign or warning. The castle feels alive in a way you never expected, an ecosystem of secrets, and you are at its center. You spend the next day mapping every corridor, stairwell, and hidden nook the rats have touched. Each chalk paw print, every gnawed edge, you trace with your fingers like a cartographer reading an invisible map. The castle becomes a labyrinth of secrets, not just stone and mortar. Your notebook fills with cryptic notes and sketches of strange symbols found etched into wood and scratched onto plaster walls. Some resemble runes. Others look like crude maps or warnings. You remember an old tale about rat tunnels beneath castles that connected not just storerooms, but secret escape routes, sometimes used by spies or traitors. The question gnaws at you. Are these tunnels purely natural, or have humans long ago adapted and used them? Historians still argue whether these underground networks were intentional designs, or just the work of countless generations of rodents. You decide to investigate the largest known tunnel entrance near the castle's south wall. It is hidden behind a loose stone, cleverly concealed, even to your practiced eye. You clear the debris and shine your candle into the darkness. The tunnel stretches back, damp and cold, with the unmistakable smell of earth and old decay. You feel the weight of centuries pressing in. You make a mental note to explore it more thoroughly tomorrow. Meanwhile, your traps continue to capture small glimpses of rat activity, but no single rat king or leader emerges. Instead, you notice something else: signs of negotiation. One of your traps holds a tiny bundle wrapped in a leaf, carefully placed beside the bait. Inside, you find a small shard of glass, glinting faintly like a message or token. You write, "Gift in trap, possible communication, or truce." You chuckle softly. "Rat diplomacy," you mutter. It sounds ridiculous, but somehow fits perfectly. You realize your role is no longer just overseer or warden. You are a mediator in an ancient conversation between humans and the hidden rulers of the castle. And every day, the conversation deepens. The days stretch onward, a rhythm of observation, note-taking, and patient waiting. You have become a silent part of the castle's ecosystem, an invisible observer in a delicate dance of shadows and whispers. The rats continue their nightly routines with a kind of eerie precision that both fascinates and unnerves you. One evening, as you examine a cluster of paw prints near the Great Hall, you spot something new: tiny footprints running alongside those of a cat. It is not unusual for cats to patrol castle grounds, but what catches your attention is the unusual pattern. The footprints move in tandem, as if the two creatures were traveling companions rather than predator and prey. You recall a quirky tidbit from your research. In some medieval castles, cats were trained to cooperate with rat overseers, forming an unspoken alliance to keep the rodent population in check without exterminating them. This delicate balance ensured that neither species became dominant enough to threaten the castle's integrity. Historians still argue whether this cat-rat partnership was intentional strategy or just coincidence. Some think it is an exaggerated legend born from occasional friendly behavior between animals. You decide to test the theory. Over the next few nights, you observe the movements of the castle cats and rats, noting moments when they pause near each other without hostility. It feels almost like a treaty. The steward, when told about your observations, only nods. The castle is a court of many players, he says. Not all of them speak our language, but they understand the rules. Your notebook grows heavier with each entry, a patchwork of facts, folklore, and cryptic clues. The castle story unfolds not just in grand halls or battle scars, but in the tiny paw prints and silent negotiations beneath the stones. You realize you have become part of something much larger than yourself. This is no ordinary pest control job. It is a glimpse into a hidden world where power, survival, and communication play out in unexpected ways. Tomorrow, you plan to explore the tunnels again, hoping to uncover more of this underground court. The next morning, armed with a sturdy lantern and your trusty notebook, you descend into the tunnel entrance you found days earlier. The air is thick and damp, carrying the scent of earth and forgotten things. Your footsteps echo softly as you step carefully, the light flickering against the rough stone walls. The tunnel twists and turns, narrowing and widening unpredictably. Your eyes catch glimpses of scratches on the walls, some natural, some clearly man-made. You trace them with your fingers, wondering who or what left these marks. You pause to listen, and a faint rustling answers from deeper within the darkness. Your heart beats faster, but you remind yourself that this is the world you have chosen to understand. Suddenly, a small figure darts across the passage, a rat, quick as a shadow. It pauses briefly, eyeing you with curious, intelligent eyes before disappearing into a side crevice. You make detailed notes. Tunnel shows signs of both natural erosion and intentional carving. Presence of rat activity confirmed. Possible hidden routes linking key castle points. You remember a fringe theory you came across. Some believe these tunnels were once secret escape routes used by castle inhabitants during sieges, later adopted by rats as their domain. Others argue they are purely the work of persistent rodents, gnawing their way through centuries. Historians still debate the origin and purpose of these underground networks, but one thing is clear to you. The tunnels are as vital to the castle's story as the grand halls above. As you turn to leave, you notice a faint glimmer in a crack in the wall, a small metallic object half buried in dust. You extract it carefully, a rusted medallion, engraved with a symbol matching the scratches found on the pantry door. You make a quick sketch and jot down discovered medallion, possible link to rat symbols, and secret signs. The medallion feels heavy in your hand, a tangible connection to the castle's hidden past. You sense that the deeper you delve, the more intertwined the lives of humans and rats become, locked in a silent, enduring pact written in stone, paw prints, and whispered secrets. Back in your quarters, you study the medallion under the soft glow of your candlelight. Its worn surface tells stories you cannot yet read, a language of symbols passed down through time, understood by very few. You run your fingers over the etching again and again, trying to decipher its meaning. The steward's words return to you, like a secret whispered in the dark. Everyone has a role, even the rats. You start connecting the dots. The scratches on the pantry door, the mysterious symbol on the medallion, the rat's strategic movements. They all point to a form of organized communication, perhaps even a system of governance. You recall an unusual but intriguing idea from your research. In some castles, rat overseers maintained not only order, but also peace treaties with other creatures, including humans. These treaties involved signs, symbols, and coded messages left in hidden places, an early form of interspecies diplomacy. Historians still argue whether such diplomatic practices were genuine or simply allegories for social order within the castle's walls. You wonder, could the rat overseer have been not only a pest controller, but also a mediator between worlds? With renewed purpose, you decide to explore the medallion further. You plan to consult with the castle's old historian, a reclusive figure rumored to know the secrets of the estate better than anyone alive. That night, as you prepare to meet the historian, the castle hums quietly around you, the steady rhythm of unseen paws, whispers of old alliances, and a story unfolding just beneath the surface. You realize you are on the verge of something far greater than you imagined. You find the historian in a dim, cluttered study filled with dusty tomes and faded maps. His eyes light up when you show him the medallion, and a slow, knowing smile spreads across his face. "This," he murmurs, "is a relic of the Rat Overseers Guild. Not many believe it existed, but it was real. A secret society of sorts, tasked with maintaining balance between the castle's human occupants and its rodent residents." He explains that the guild used symbols and tokens like your medallion to communicate and negotiate, ensuring that rats did not overrun food stores, that they helped in keeping other pests at bay, and that their court remained stable. You scribble notes frantically, absorbing every detail. The historian shares a quirky fact. Some guild members were said to be rat lovers, treating their charges almost like pets or allies. There are tales of overseers who carried notebooks, recording rat movements, deals struck, and breaches of trust. Historians still argue whether the guild was an official institution or more of a myth that grew over time to explain strange occurrences in castles. The historian leans forward. Your discovery of the medallion suggests you are closer than anyone in centuries to understanding this delicate balance. But beware, the line between friend and foe is thin. You thank him, mind racing with possibilities. The castle suddenly feels like a chessboard where every piece, human or rat, has its part to play. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere in the shadows, the silent council of rats continues their watch, their whispers carried on the breeze. You close your notebook and look around the study, feeling the weight of history settle like dust on your shoulders. The story is far from over. You leave the historian's study with the medallion tucked safely in your pocket, your mind buzzing with new knowledge and questions. The castle once a place of simple stone and mortar, now feels alive with unseen players and unspoken agreements. Walking through the corridors, you notice the subtle signs you might have overlooked before: the way shadows shift, the faint rustle behind tapestries, the delicate scratches that form a secret language only the initiated understand. You think back to the steward's cryptic warning and the idea that rats were more than pests. They were participants in the castle's complex social order. Perhaps, in some way, they were the unsung protectors of the fortress, managing chaos and preserving order through their own intricate system. A quirky thought crosses your mind. Maybe the rat overseer was the original castle diplomat, long before humans wrote treaties and signed charters. A silent guardian whose notebook was as vital as the king's scrolls. Historians still argue whether rat overseers existed in a formal capacity, or if the term was a metaphor for the inevitable human struggle to coexist with nature's smallest invaders. You stop at the castle's great hall, now bathed in the soft glow of early dawn. You take a deep breath, the cool air filling your lungs, and jot down your thoughts. Rats and humans share this ancient space, bound by mutual respect and unspoken rules. You realize your own role is evolving, not just as observer, but as part of the story. The castle's rat overseer is no longer a distant figure of legend, but a living, breathing reality you embody. The castle's secrets have found a new keeper. As the sun rises, casting golden light over the castle battlements, you settle down to write your final entries. Your notebook is now a tapestry of observations, theories, and stories, each page a testament to the unseen world thriving beneath and within the fortress walls. You reflect on the journey, the curious scratches, the symbolic medallion, the strange alliances between cats and rats, and the steward's subtle hints, all pieces of a puzzle revealing a hidden social order, where rats were not mere pests, but vital actors in the castle's survival. You smile softly, imagining the original rat overseers, silent scribes of their small domain, balancing survival and cooperation with human inhabitants. Their notebooks, now lost to time, once held secrets that maintained peace in a chaotic world. Historians may continue to debate the reality of these overseers, but your experiences have shown you a truth beyond written records. That power often lies in the smallest and most unexpected places. You close your notebook, the final word written, the story told. Outside, the castle hums with life, its ancient walls guarding not just history, but the ongoing tale of coexistence and quiet diplomacy. Tonight, you will rest knowing you have uncovered a secret world, one that reminds you why every castle needed a rat overseer with a notebook. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and the world outside softens into whispers, remember the castle's secrets lie not just in stone, but in the quiet moments between heartbeats. The rats, the shadows, the silent scribbles, they remind us that even in darkness, order can emerge. So breathe deeply, feel the gentle hum of life around you, and let your mind drift into calmness. Tomorrow brings new stories, new mysteries, but for now, rest easy knowing you have walked through the hidden corridors of history and found the delicate dance of life In unexpected places, sweat dreams.